Hey everybody, this is Herschel from High School Top 200, and this Burnside High School review is brought to you by Fineline Barbers. What Fineline Barbers is doing is that they are putting on a Aotearoa barber competition, which will involve the best barbers in the country, coming to Hamilton for a one-day event, and they will find out who the best barbers are in the country. Also, they will be setting up a Facebook page and an Instagram page for barbers to upload their work so that we as a public can see what they can do and see the talents that we have around the country. And so that is something for us to look out for. It brings the community together of barbers and stuff like that. And so they will get their networking going, and it will just become a stronger industry all in one. So look out for that Aotearoa Barber competition by Fineline Barbers in September 2017. Burnside High School, I've watched some of their games throughout the year, and they were like a hot and cold team with really good talent, and it was kind of hard to sort of. It used to frustrate me sometimes when I'd watch their games because I would look at the roster on paper. I would see that they would have. Really top players like Perry and like Perry and Tiaki, and obviously Cam, or both Cam Porter and Cam Russell. They're guys like that. I really like Jacob Mataiti as well. I thought he was really good, and then guys like Nick Wilson were pretty underrated. And of course, Mikaele in the backline was just a beast, and I'm not too sure why he wasn't really paid much attention to. But even when you just look at, like, it's one of those teams where when you look at Burnside and you think of Burnside as a team, obviously they're not traditionally a big rugby school that will come out and sort of blow out a lot of teams, and then you would put them up against traditional teams like St. Bede's and Christchurch and sort of Shirley and that, and even Christ College, and think, oh, maybe they can snatch this one away. They're not really that kind of team. But with the roster that they had this year, I thought they could have been that team. Because even with those best players that they had in there, and then you add like young fellas like Jason Embling as well as Chris Bainbridge. You add those guys with the sort of the core senior fellas, you would think that that's the kind of team that can upset the bigger teams that in their competition. And it was funny too, because I think I watched. I watched 5 games. I think it was. I watched 5 games before I saw them at the top 4, and watching them on film first is one thing. But then when you see them in real life, like Perry, I underestimated Perry a bit on film, but when I saw him in real life, and I thought, shoot, he is way better than what I thought he was. Cam Russell was the same. Cam Porter was kind of the same as well. Nick Wilson was in that category as well, and Jason Embling was also a better player than I thought. And seeing him live in action, a lot of those guys there were kind of the guys who were like, oh shoot, these guys are a lot better than I thought they were, kind of thing. Which even made it more frustrating, because I was thinking, shoot, so how did these guys lose these games that they lost? And so when I look sort of over their season, when they can beat a team like Nelson, and they were ranked at the time as well, and actually, because I put as their worst losses, I put against Waimea and against Melbourne, because they were basically 1 week. They played them from 1 week to the next week, and they lost both of them by 3 points. Both of them by 3 points. So basically, if they had won those 2 games as well as beating Nelson, they would have taken care of that top of the South Island kind of thing. and Nelson, Waimea, and also Marlborough were all three teams that were contending in the UC Cup. So, for me, in my mind, I think, well, if they can take out these three teams, and you kind of just link them ahead and be like, well, these three teams can take out Christchurch as well, and draw with Christchurch, and then, sort of beat up on the other teams too, you think, well, why can't Burnside stand up and do the same thing? Especially with a roster that they had. I think that Burnside and their rugby management did a great job in bringing these boys up all at the same time, being this year. And then going out and then acquiring someone like Mikaele, who will give them that big, massive firepower in the back line as well, which he was a beast. Like, he's just not one of those guys that you can just stop automatically. It takes a lot to bring him down. You would have think that, okay, the management has done their job, the sports directors and stuff have done their job and gone out and found players and brought them sort of all together, and then they just don't put it together on the field. Now, I don't personally know if it's a thing where the game plan did not match the players, or and I always have like thoughts like this, as like, well, did the coaches grab these players for this type of game plan, or did they get the players and then say, let's work it around, let's do a game plan to these players? Because like, I think if you're going to recruit, and this is where recruiting becomes different, is that like you say, okay, this is the game plan we want, let's recruit players that can fit into this game plan, not just recruit the best players, but players that fit, because those things don't go in hand to hand. Those are different, separate situations. Like, the best players don't necessarily match into any kind of system that you run. So that's where I kind of think with Burnside is that the situation that they were in with these players that they had? Because I feel that these players are up to it. So it's got to be something like that. They had some really bad games, even though they did come really close to some. Like Christ, I don't mind the Christ College in their first game up 39-17, because that's still kind of like your first game, still trying to get comfortable with, okay, now the season's starting kind of thing. I mean, not all teams get off to the best starts. The Christchurch boys 39-0. That I don't think that's a real good reflection on what Burnside actually is as a team. 19-5 against Shirley, and I watched this game, and that game was really it's either disappointing or frustrating. No, it was more frustrating. It was more frustrating because they made so many mistakes that didn't need to happen, and they had some good momentum, and then even when they stopped Shirley on defense, it was just like the smallest, dumbest mistakes that let it slip through. And that was kind of the same with the Nelson game as well. It was like it kind of had that kind of feel and situation to it, a couple of weeks later. But when I talk about it, it's like, well, when you have a loss against Shirley, and it's 19-5, and then you play Ashburton in the next game and you only score 29 points to 11, that's kind of the game that you want to be like, all right, let's sort ourselves out, let's get on a big positive note, let's put our game plan together again after about 7 weeks, and then let's get ready for Nelson. I don't think that they did that against Ashburton, about, with the little clips that I saw. I think I saw like maybe 9 different clips of, like 3 or 4 minutes or something like that, but that didn't show an indication of what they were going to do in Nelson, because they kind of made the same mistakes that they did in Shirley that they did in Nelson. So like really they didn't do any better. Then they came up against Ron Kelly after the Nelson game, and then they scored. It was a 37-7 game, which tells me that they actually went and did what they were supposed to do. They fixed it up and they prepared well. Then they went to Waimea and they just didn't. It just didn't turn over the way that they should have. Because like even when they beat Nelson, and because I think that they should have beat Nelson by a lot more than what they did, and that 22-17 was a good scoreline. but I just don't think that they prepared well when it came to like fixing up the problems, because they still made the same problems that they made in Shirley. And then it came back to and then it had a week break. They should have prepared, but then they didn't when it came down to Waimea and Marlborough. So like I was kind of confused. They beat St. Bede's, which was good. I didn't. They beat Timaru, which is another good game, and then lost to them the week after. So it got a bit. It got a bit frustrating about where the angle was or what they were doing and how they prepared. But I really personally didn't know what they were going for. I still think that they had some of the best players in the country, and as well as the combinations that they had with it, I thought were really good and they were put together well. I personally don't know what it was. I think, I don't personally know what it was that they weren't able to fix, or what was the real problem to it. But I thought the roster was great, and seeing them live was just a lot better. Next year, I think they might struggle a bit, because I know a lot of them are not coming back, and some have transferred, and so we'll see how that goes. I'll do some more homework and see what it's like. But that's my review of Burnside, and keep an eye out for the rest of them. Peace.